that would allow me to follow him around like a little puppy dog to Pleasant View Elementary Schools, Playfields, Newport Junior High, Einstein High School. I was always welcome. And another big attribute was the fact that he protected me against bullies. I got beat up one time, and after the crying and the bleeding and the swelling, turns out I ended up winning the fight because I broke his hand with my head. So he had a cast on for 6 weeks, and I was kind of healed up in a month. I mean, in a week. And then Doug grabbed the guy and threw him up against the lockers in Einstein. He said, "You better not touch my brother again." And it didn't hurt. And anybody that's here from Einstein or Montgomery County really has heard of Keith Slater. He was better than Leroy Brown. So I never got touched again in junior high or high school. I was able to meet so many coaches and their successors that Doug played for, and some of them I played for. Like Donald Brown of Newport Junior High, who later coached at Wheaton, and Rick's father, Rick Eisenachter's father. We used to call him Big Rick and Ricky Little Rick, the determined, because the families were so close. And then I played for Coach Brabakis and Coach Bortnick, and later for Al Farrar at Einstein in varsity basketball. He coached both of us. So that was a lot of fun. And knowing Coach Keller, who was a mentor to Doug, Rick, and so many others. I never played for him, but he was always someone that I really looked up to. And Doug and Rick took their show to Auburn University to play for Shub Jordan, who was a legend at Auburn, kind of like Bear Bryant was at Alabama. And they made the Gator Bowl, which was a high-profile bowl because you had Archie Manning, quarterback in Ole Miss, and Pat Sullivan, quarterback in Auburn. And so it got a lot of attention from the national media, and had two announcers, Al DeRogatis and somebody like Pat Summerall. It was a big deal having those two high-powered teams. And then Doug got into the game, and Abby would not let me tell this story because she was so embarrassed about it. Protected the Doug. But then Al DeRogatis says, and in comes 48, Doug Brasse, known as the slowest wide receiver in the Southeastern Conference. And I was with my Einstein friends, and everybody started laughing. And so when I talked to my parents, they said, well, after that, you got to Paul Harvey, if people remember Paul Harvey, the rest of the story. When Abby heard the rest of the story, she says, yeah, go ahead and tell it. So I, afterwards, the Al DeRogatis says, but Coach Shub Jordan said he had the best hands on the team. If he touched it, he caught it. And so I thought that was the rest of the story. But it wasn't. I Googled Doug. I don't know why I did it, but I Googled and I saw Clemson and Auburn, and Doug caught 3 passes for 103 yards. And so I asked him about it. I said, I never heard of that game. But he says, well, I should have had 2 touchdowns. I said, why? He says, because I was way behind the defensive backs, and I caught the ball, and I got caught from behind twice. I should have had 2 touchdowns. And it turns out the guy that caught him was Charlie Waters, who was All-American for Clemson, and then he was All-Pro for the Dallas Cowboys, and were a couple Super Bowl champions. So that's not bad company to get caught from behind with. But Doug, at Einstein baseball, he was him and Rick were All-American football and baseball. But Doug, his senior year, went from being a singles hitter to a home run hitter because my dad knew all the mechanics of baseball, and he finally got Doug to get his hips into it. And so he started hitting home runs, and I wish he could have played for Auburn like Rick did, but he had to do spring practice, so he wasn't able to play baseball and keep his football scholarship. Doug had a career in pharmaceuticals, and then he moved to, when he retired, he moved to Leisure World and met Abby. And Abby and him had a life together of him teaching her how to play golf. And he must have been a good teacher because she went from 0 to shooting about 100 within about a year. And that was, they sang and danced together in Fun and Fancy. They played bridge together. They did so many things. And one of my favorite ones was they had a sock hop. And one time in the sock hop, they had this huge Halloween party. And Doug didn't win it because he had conflict of interest, because he's the one that ran the sock hop. But he had a perfect Elvis Presley gi that he would wear, and with the big hair and put on some sideburns. Yeah, he looked like Elvis. So that was fun. But that was the sock hop that Doug did, was sort of dancing to 50s and 60s music, and very, very popular. And this week I became very emotional talking to players that played against Doug and Rick. One was an All-American linebacker, middle linebacker for Perry. His name's Don Cornett. So I talked to Don and Val Falcone and others that called me and told me how much they respected Doug and what fun it was to play against him. And Don's story from Perry, they were undefeated. They had one more game left, which was Einstein. And the coaches called a meeting with the players on Sunday before the game. And Don says they scoped out that game the whole week. And it was basically double team Doug and Steve Farrell. And Don says, my job was to hit Rick Eisenhower as hard as I could on every play. So I didn't care what anybody else was doing, I just went after Rick. And Doug and Steve always had 2 defenders on them. Well, Perry won that game, but Doug got 2 touchdowns. So that was, he lost the scoring championship to Tony Green at Gaithersburg, who ended up, he was such a good athlete, he was drafted #1 by the Buffalo Bills. So I'd like to conclude by saying, Doug, you gave me great memories to share today. And only Abby's still right there saying, hey, you're going on for time. And wrap it up, or Rick isn't going to have enough time. So we love the stories, to be able to talk about what Doug gave us over the years. And I'll conclude with, I love you, Doug. Thanks for the memories. We miss you.